Good evening and welcome to TNN Bull. I say good evening. You could be listening to this at literally any time of the day. This is the second episode of 30-Minute Murder, or the 30-Minute Murder. I'm your host. I'm Will, and I'm joined again by the co-host today, Danny. How are you, Danny?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, good, mate. It's been a long day. It's been a very, very long day. But we prevail. We move on because tonight's topic is a follow-on from what we did the other day. If you listen to that, it was about the Amityville Horror and the murders that took place there and the theories, etc. We're now going to talk about the paranormal side. Danny, how are you feeling going into this?
Mate, yeah, I'm excited because this is where it really gets a bit cray. You know what I mean? Like 50 Shades of Cray. So this is where it really gets into the nitty gritty. So yeah, let's do it. I like it.
Yeah, right. Amazing stuff. I'm glad you're pumped, because so am I, because this is the best part of the story. Again, I say best lightly. Obviously, yeah. There was a family that was brutally murdered. But yeah, so for those of you who are unaware, just a quick recap. Basically, family of 7 lived in this small village called Amityville. Few family issues. Eldest son was sent down for shooting them all with a Marlin 35 cal rifle. Yeah, that's the first part of the story that we went into the other day. So if you want that part, go back to our previous podcast, episode 1 of 30-Minute Murder. What happened afterwards is a family called the Lutzes moved in. There was George, Kathy, Daniel, Christopher, and Missy. Daniel, Christopher, and Missy being the children, and then there was George and Kathy. Now, Danny, do you know anything about this family? Can you elaborate on what I've just been through?
Yeah, of course. So a little bit. Yeah, I know some bits and bobs. So we're talking. The original murders happened in 1974. So roughly, I want to say a year, maybe 2 after that.
It was practically a year.
Yeah. So the Lutz family, they moved into the house because of its history. The house was going cheap, and it's in a particularly nice area. So it was a pretty good deal for them to get this house. They saved up. They put everything they had into buying this house. So, lifelong savings. They'd done well in business themselves. George had done really well in business. So, lifelong savings put into this house. So, when they get there, things start to go a little bit, strange, if nothing else. So, most importantly, before we go into it all, to bear in mind that George, particularly, we're talking, this guy's an ex-Marine, right? So, tough dude. I may not be 100% sure here, but I think he had a black belt in karate, or he was pretty prolific in karate. So this guy's a tough dude. Before we go down any route of anything else, he's a tough dude, right? So not really scared of too much, to be fair. He's seen it all already. So they move into this house, happy family, and within an hour, I don't know if you know this, Will, actually, because it's a bit of a strange one, but within an hour, their black Labrador had tried to hang itself, believe it or not. So Lab is sort of like, tied up because, of course, it's a new house. They don't want to go missing. And within an hour of them being in the house, the Lab jumps over the fence on purpose to hang itself. So you kind of know off the bat something's not quite right with this place. Because obviously, Labradors, bless them, they're not physically built to perfection, but they're the most happy dogs in the world, man. And all of a sudden, just, that happened. So off the bat, stuff's a bit weird. So yeah.
It's funny you should say that. Obviously, within the first hour, the Labrador is trying to call quits.
They saved the dog, by the way. They save the dog, so everyone knows.
The dog survived.
That's the important bit.
Yeah. I think his name was Harry. But yeah, what is even sort of, I find this stranger, is Kathy was a Catholic, Kathy the Catholic, and she knew somebody in the area. Her and George did. George wasn't really religious, but he kind of did it for the family. I mean, the kids weren't his. They were from a previous marriage, but he did it as best as he could to please the family. So basically what happened was they got a priest to come in, just to come and bless the house, because, I mean, you would, wouldn't you?
Your rate would.
Yeah.
Yeah, your rate would.
And they did know what had gone off. They were perfectly aware when they got this house at a bargain price, why it was a bargain. And they got a priest to come in and bless the house. As the police was walking, the priest was walking around. He actually went into what Kathy was going to use it as, called a sewing room. So she was going to set up all of her machines in there, and that was going to be her sort of safe haven space. And it was in this room where, I know the film's portrayed differently, but what actually happened is another story. Father Mancuso walked into this room and immediately got this horrendous feeling of just utter despair and death, and just I've never been in a room like that, so I can't even imagine what it's like. But you can sort of comprehend where he's going with it. So anyway, he leaves the house. He's not actually seen the Lutzes. He just kind of went in, and yeah. So he left the house, and then later on that night, he rang the Lutzes just to say, I was blessing the house. You guys were busy filling up the boathouse and things like that. I just thought I'd let myself in and go and do it and that. So the Lutzes thanked him, and here's a really, really creepy fact. Father Mancuso actually said, I will just warn you though, I don't like the look of that sewing room. Where are the boys sleeping? And he asked where the two lads were sleeping. They said, no, they're not in there. And he said, right, that's fine. What are you using it for? So Kathy explained it was going to be a sewing room. And he says, right, just be careful because I don't like that room. Now, this is a fact, okay? So all in all, that room itself is creepy in the fact that the priest has turned around and said, no, I'm not doing that. It's a bad room. Do you know what that room was actually used for before the Lutzes moved in? No. Actually, no. So basically, the night that the DeFeos were shot.
Yeah.
Once they'd taken all the crime scene photos they could, the DeFeos' bodies were actually lined up in that room.
No way. That makes a lot of sense, actually, with something that we'll bring up later. Oh, man, that's creepy.
Yeah.
So that was kind of like the morgue for a little while, if you will. Pretty much. That explains a lot why he was pretty, I don't like that room. There's a lot of death there. Yeah, there was.
Wow. What makes it even worse is nobody knew that. Only the police officers on site that night knew that they'd stored the bodies in that room. And the reason they did it is because it was the closest room to everywhere. It was just at the top of the stairs. It was easy enough, to get them all in, to get to get them into the body bags to take outside. So yeah, that is a true fact.
Well, remind me about it later, because that's quite important actually. It's something I was going to bring up a bit later on.
Yes.
So yeah, we'll get to that.
So what do you know from there on after they moved in, Danny? What?
Yeah. So basically, I imagine quite a lot of people have seen sort of, the horror film adaptations, or one of them at least. And to a certain extent, that is sort of how it all started. So the typical kind of thing where, George starts waking up, actually, funnily enough, 3:15 in the morning, which, of course, if we're looking back, which is when the predicted time of the original murders took place. So this starts to happen. He sort of wakes up, can't get back to sleep. He feels agitated, can't get comfy. And then, of course, he then starts to hear strange noises, like rappings on the walls, bangs. Everything feels constantly cold in the house, whether it's warm or not. Different rooms are cold, some rooms are warm at different times for no reason. George starts to lose weight. So George, when you see pictures of him, he's not a small dude. You know, he's quite a well-built chap. He starts to lose weight drastically. His personality starts to change. He gets more agitated with the kids, which was never something that came into the family before, if that makes sense. So Kathy notices a particular change in his demeanour, which of course is related to the stress of getting woke up in the 3 o'clock in the morning with banging and sort of things like that, and other strange things. So there's swarms of houseflies in certain rooms when it's midwinter. That doesn't happen, which of course, another phenomenon, doesn't really make sense. And then the daughter Jodie starts also acting very strange. I think it was Kathy who realizes this, and they get really concerned about her. She gets an imaginary friend. I know obviously that's something that's really quite common in kids. I've still obviously got imaginary friends, but that's obviously something quite common. But in particular, this friend of Jodie's, Missy, the daughter, has an imaginary friend called Jodie, and Jodie's a giant pig, which is bizarre. And they notice some really strange behaviour, coming from the young daughter. So these phenomena start to affect them all. It starts with George, but it steadily starts to kind of develop through the family, and of course a bit of a cause for concern.
It's things weren't right from day one. Just to run through this again, so Missy's got an imaginary friend. George is sort of losing weight. The house is never warm. There's house flies knocking about in the middle of winter. Mainly as well, the house flies. Do you know where they were situated mainly, Danny?
Yeah, I've got a funny feeling that I've got a funny idea of where that's going to be. So they were obviously situated in the sewing room. And when we're talking, we're not talking a few flies. We're talking about, a swarm. And it was a case of no matter how many times they killed these flies, they'd reappear. So it was definitely something that was just out of the ordinary. George started hearing screams, footsteps. Weird things like, I remember one of the things that George talks about is one of the toilets started to turn black.
Yes, it did.
As in literally from white to black. And some of the china started to do the same as well, like the household china. And just really surreal things like that started to occur.
So as time was moving on, it was sort of George trying to make the best of a bad situation. Kathy was determined something was going off. Kathy spent a lot of her time in the kitchen, and she kept saying that something kept walking past her and embracing her, sort of like a mother's touch or something along the lines of that. And she turned around and there was nobody there. George also claimed that on a couple of occasions, and if you read the book by Jay Hansen, it's a really good read. He'd wake up in the middle of the night around 3:15, as Danny mentioned earlier, and he'd hear a marching band downstairs, full-blown marching band. And he'd go down, all the lights would be off, no one's there. They could smell horrible things from all around the house. They could see sort of green slime oozing out of the walls and the keyholes. There was extreme cold spots in certain areas of the house. When Father Mancuso went round again, he went back into the sewing room to re-bless it and bless everything as well. He heard a voice scream at him, "Get out!" in the sewing room. Just looking at some of the other statements, a nearby garage door kept opening and closing. An invisible spirit kept knocking a knife down in the kitchen. George used to wake up with Kathy levitating off the bed. Daniel and Christopher also levitated off their beds. Yeah, it's mental. Danny, do you know about the window incident with young Daniel's fingers?
Yeah, so, and this is a bit of a controversial one. So it was claimed that there was a window that would open and shut by itself, and it traps the young lad's fingers in it at some point, and obviously, in a lot of pain. George originally says that he had to take him to hospital, but when they actually checked the hospital records, there was no admittance of him going to the hospital, which of course, and then there was a big uproar later on about that. Well, was that true? Was that not true? It's very controversial, and I, to be honest, I don't think we'll ever find out whether that is, truth or not.
Yeah, I mean, both George and Kathy have passed away now. Daniel did a documentary on Amazon. It's called My Amityville Horror. If you've got Prime, you can watch it for free. And it's him explaining what happened to him whilst he was there and the detrimental effect it's had on him later on in life. He goes into detail about the things that happened. I find it kind of biased because Daniel hated George. And there is a good sort of 20 minutes of Daniel basically saying how much he hates George and how much, George ruined his life. So, that makes me kind of question, was the house playing up, or did you just have so much of a hatred for George that you were imagining things to get out? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of creepy stuff that happened that you can Google yourself. We're going to go into the controversies of this now and what the public thought. And we'll do it from both sides, Danny. We'll do things.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll do things that back up what the Lutzes have said and sort of put them in the limelight of saying, yeah, no, they weren't lying. But then we'll also put things in that, make you sort of question this and think, well, was this just for money?
Yeah, there's definitely two sides, right? Absolutely.
Yeah. So the first thing that we'll talk about, Danny, is they were bogged down in legal and financial issues from George's company. This prompted skeptics to sort of believe that they had a motive to create a fantastical story to sell to the public. You've got to think of it like that, Danny. You've got a business, you're not making much money. You've just taken out a house that's worth £80,000, which is basically all the money you've got in the world. You take a look at it and you go, well, 6 people died here. We could really do something here to make some money.
Exactly.
I see that side of it. If that is the case, I'm not even angry at them.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
I mean, because they made millions from the book, from the films. Don't get me wrong. They've read the book, they've watched the film, and they did turn around and say, nah, a lot of that was dramatised, that never happened. But that's what you're going to get when you Hollywood a story. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly, yeah.
What do you think to that?
Yeah, I mean, there's two sides to the argument, absolutely, literally, as you've said it. And it's a tough one, isn't it? Because, like you said, it's not an easy way to make money, but there's a money-making scheme there to be had. And at the end of the day, Hollywood in it, that's exactly what happened, regardless of whether that's what their intentions were or not. But the flip side to that point is that when they left the house, obviously we're going to go into that a little bit later on, they left everything. And I mean, everything. They left every single possession that they owned in that house, other than the clothes on the back, including the yacht, the boat that they had, because of course it's situated on a river. So they everything, the brand new boat, the riverboat that they bought, when they got the house, they left everything behind. So you could argue it either way, but
I was literally going to say that. Like on the flip side of this, why would you run away from a house after spending your life savings on it?
Yeah, absolutely.
After being there for 28 days and not picking up any of your possessions? Why would you do that? If you were,
Yeah.
if something hadn't have driven you out, why would you do that? You know, this is it. With all of these theories, there is a plus side and a negative side. Now, the next one that we'll move on to is not a lot of people know this, but after their story was made public, it was some scientists actually. They turned around and said, "We've got the second best polygraph reader in the world with us at the moment. Would you be willing to take a lie detector test?" And George and Kathy, without even thinking about it, turned around and said, "Yeah, let's do it."
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's do
George
it.
actually did 3.
Yeah.
3 separate tests, I think. And without, with no, there was no discrepancies. With Kathy as well, it all came back that there was no deception whatsoever, and the questions were very specific. In relation to, basically, were you lying, mate? And so, I mean, that in itself has some weight behind it. Do you know what I mean?
They passed with flying colours. And like you've just said about the specific questions, they weren't questions like, did you experience any hauntings within the house? They were, did you see green slime coming from the wall on the second floor?
Specifics,
and it was crazy. They passed with flying colours. On the flip side of that, this is the 70s.
Yeah.
Polygraphing and lie detectors were new. They were very new pieces of technology, which makes me sort of question: was it even working properly?
Yeah.
If they took the test today, and sadly they can't after passing away, would they still pass? So, like you said, there's a flip side to each theory. Another one is the Lutz's former lawyer, William Webber, his name is. He said the 3 of them came up with the horror story over many, many bottles of wine.
Yep.
So, basically, the thing is with that, now, this is kind of a free-parter here, Danny. Now, William Webber, obviously, he said that they came up with it after many bottles of wine, blah, 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 blah. In the first instance, I can understand why that would, come to fruition, because he actually fell out with them over money issues. So when William Webber agreed to, take the story to Jay Anson with the book, to create a film, he said, "Yeah, okay, let's do it." Blah 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 blah. And then when it came down to actual money and who was getting what split, the Lutzes were a bit like, "Well, why are you taking so much?" So then he turned around and says, "Yeah, no, it's a bunch of lies. We all materialised that." But then that also makes me think he said that to get his own over on the Lutzes. And a lot of people don't know this. William Webber was actually Ronnie DeFeo's
attorney.
Yeah.
So messed up.
That makes me think that he approached the Lutzes to be their attorney because he sort of thought, if I can get them to sell this story that they've just told me, I can get Ronnie some money. And that's actually why they fell out over money, because Webber wanted a big cut because he wanted to give Ronnie some.
Well, Ronnie's name was on the contract that they got given, and that's what it was about. It's sort of like, well, why we're not paying a murderer here?
That's exactly.
You can kind of see the moral there at the end of the day, can't you? From their perspective. So again, that, like you said, that's a whole nother flip side, isn't it? Like, it's absolutely.
This is it, and. I mean, personally, I can see how areas of that story could have been fabricated, but at the same time, how do you explain a priest knowing where the bodies were stored without even knowing the information? How do you explain the flies in the room? I mean, yes, you could turn around and say, well, there were 6 bodies stored in there, probably for a good 24 hours. But within that point, if you know stages of decomposition, fluids will be leaking through the floorboards and the carpets. Flies may have manifested from not parasites, but you know where I'm going with this. You know, you could argue all of this and that, and the whole sort of area of the paranormal side of the Amityville story is a very big grey area, and no one is ever going to find out the truth. Nobody's ever going to find out the truth of what happened on that night in November 1974 when Ronald went round and shot his entire family. And as you said in the first podcast, that is what makes this case so fascinating. Did you want to touch on the last night they spent in 21 Ocean Avenue? 112 Ocean Avenue.
Well, yeah, but I think just before we do then, I think it's really important that we mention what happened before that. So, of course, like you said, with the things like the marching band and things like that, it's you know, I think they were just terrified. So, from what I understand, they literally fled the house in the early hours of the morning. And it was literally, look, we ain't taking anything because whatever's in here is in our stuff. Like, that's it. So we're just they were just terrified, from what I can get.
Yeah, the if you read the book, the straw that breaks the camel's back, per se, is the boys are actually waking up in their beds and there is a figure standing over them both. And I think he says some things to the boys that scares them. They sprint over to the mum and dad's room. The figure follows them in. George sees the figure, tells Kathy to get out the house with the boys. He grabs Missy. And then they all run out because this figure sort of drives them out.
Well, the thing is, the boys were still sleeping in the same beds that the original family were murdered in. The only thing that had been replaced was the mattress. So, I mean, that's creepy in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, it's I don't know. It's not the sort of thing that I'd do if I had a family with kids, you know. Right, kids, I'm already dragging you to the murder house. But not only that, you see those beds upstairs that you're going to sleep in? Two boys died in those beds, you know. For me, to be honest with you. So this leads me to the final question. What do you believe, Danny?
Oh man, it's just such a bizarre story. I think it's important before I sort of say my real opinion on it. I think there was a lot of investigation to do with the paranormal side of things. So Ed and Lorraine Warren, who were, two of, if not the sort of pioneers in paranormal investigation, they did investigate the house. When I said about before, when you said about the bodies being in the sewing room, well, without knowing that, when Lorraine Warren went into that room on camera and all audioed and everything else, before she even knew anything about what had happened in that room, she saw the dead bodies lined up in that room as soon as she walked in there. So the thing is, it's easy to fantasize, it's an amazing horror story, but there are a lot of things that are too difficult to explain without it being something other than, it's just, there's too much for it to just be circumstance. There's too many accounts of various things that are sort of, paranormal, if you like, that are just too difficult to explain, that we can't explain. And so for me, I think, again, I am on the fence with it because at the end of the day, I don't know. But Ed and Lorraine Warren, for people who don't know who they are, Google them, and they devoted their lives to helping people who are going through hauntings and infestation and things like that, and they're the real deal. These guys, Ed's no longer with us, but they're really serious about this stuff, and it's hard not to believe when it comes from someone like that. I do believe that there was something evil in that house. I don't know what it is, I don't know whether I want to say demon or what, but I believe there's definitely something that isn't of this world that tormented those people, to be honest. What about yourself?
It's also important to note with the Warrens, they didn't walk into any house and say, yeah, this is haunted. Oh, if they went to a case and felt nothing, they would quite openly say, no, there's nothing wrong here.
Yeah.
They weren't one to lie, to fabricate stories. If they felt that something was okay, they'd turn around and say, you got nothing to worry about. I promise you that. Just chill out. It's absolutely fine. They didn't make big deals out of fake stories because that's not the business they were in. If they believed everything was haunted, nobody would believe them, if that makes sense. Me personally, I think the murders that Ronnie DeFeo did, I think that's just a tragedy. I don't think demons told him to do it. I don't think that a hooded figure came and saw him in the night. I honestly believe that Dawn, we said it the other day. I honestly believe that they were meant to just kill the dad. Dawn went on a bit of a frenzy, and then Ronnie got mad and shot her. So I think the only person Ronnie killed was Dawn, and I think Dawn did the rest herself. As to afterwards, with the whole paranormal side of things, I'd like to believe that there is an afterlife. I'm on the fence of ghosts, if they're real, if they're not. I'm yet to see anything convincing. However, in my own personal opinion, if ghosts are real, I think a perfect place for them to start would be a house where a family of 6 was slain brutally.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. And of course, like we said in the last episode, the photograph of the child that appeared.
Let me get that
is
now.
I
just want to see.
I mean, A, it's bizarre, and B, there's no explanation for that. And things happened after the investigations as well. So when they actually did the original investigation with Ed and Lorraine Warren, they had a team of investigators there, and almost every single person got affected in some way by what was going on. So people were collapsing from chest pains in the house. And then later on, Jay Anson, whilst he was writing the book, he had a heart attack whilst he was writing it.
Yeah, he did.
He also then later on had another heart attack that killed him. When he originally sent the manuscript off to his typist, she had a house fire whilst the manuscript was in the building. Like things like that. I mean, I know obviously these could be coincidences, but when you add it all up, it's interesting, right? It's strange, and it isn't normal for all these things to be associated with one place. And that's what gets you thinking. I'm like you, mate. I'm always kind of a bit on the fence with things like that, but it just feels to me like there's a bit too much for it to be a coincidence. And I do believe that there are sort of I mean, I don't know if ghost is the right word anymore. There's probably much more scientific words, but I do believe that these things exist, and I think, like you said, it's the perfect breeding ground when there's such a tragedy there that already occurred.
It's one of life's many, many, many unsolved mysteries. Now, we're going to be ending the podcast very soon. Just a bit of an update on what we're going to be bringing you over the next few weeks. So Danny and myself are going to be bringing you 30-Minute Murder. We'll try and pop out as many episodes as we can, as quickly as we can. I do apologise for the delay on this one. The next couple of murder cases that I want to delve into, one being the Chris Watts murders, where are you familiar with that, Danny?
Yeah, sounds good to me.
One being the Chris Watts murders, the White House Farm murders as well.
Very, very, very interesting case as well.
And we're also going to be speaking to a friend of yours, Danny, aren't we? Who is quite well knowledged on the paranormal world. Do you want to explain a little? you want to explain a bit about her?
Yeah, so I have a friend called Charlie who we're going to speak to real soon. And she, a bit like us, is maybe slightly obsessed with the morbid. I don't think she'll mind me saying that at all. But also, she is very, very knowledgeable when it comes to the paranormal side of things, far surpassing what I know. And I like to think that I know a fair bit, but, you know, she's like next level. So she's going to be really interesting to talk to, and it'd be really interesting to bounce our theories off and see what she has to say about them. And I'm fairly certain she'll be able to intellectually bring a lot more of the paranormal science to it as well. And I think from me, I'd like to also, I think we should look at the Sharon Tate murder as well. That would be a really interesting one. With the Manson family, so that'd be really cool for us to have a look at as well. So yeah, plenty up and coming. And guys, to be fair, if you've got any, you know, cases that you'd like to hear, you know, covered, just mention it in the comments, and we'll do what we can. We'll get as many of these out as we can.
We will do, you know, anything. If you've got a burning case from the depths of Texas that no one's ever heard of,
yeah, I'm up for that, definitely.
You know, we will look into it and turn over every single stone we can. We're also going to be doing a bit more of a serious, close to home story. I won't give too much away. Danny, the co-host today, speaking like he's not with me right now. Danny has had a rough couple of years, you could call it, couldn't you, Danny?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to delve into that as well. Danny has kindly agreed to share his story with us.
There's no murder, though, just throwing that out there so everyone gets that.
There's no murder, but all I will say is the fact that me and Danny are actually together doing this podcast and speaking to each other fills me with joy.
Yeah, man, absolutely.
Because if you look at it and I'm sure Danny won't mind me putting it like this, if you look at things on a factual basis and and risk and chance, somebody was looking down on Danny, and I am very, very lucky to be able to have this podcast with him today.
Oh man, you make me blush.
It is what it is. You know, Danny is a remarkable man, and I can't wait to delve into his story. And like I said, I didn't want to give too much away there, but yeah, we will get to that, and I promise you, it will be one of the most mind-blowing, interesting stories of recovery, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, man.
That you are ever likely to hear. So yes, that is a massive thank you from me, Will. A massive thank you again to all of our sponsors, all of our listeners. We cannot do this without you. Please subscribe, please like, please share. Send this to your weird cousin that loves to hear about murders and people being shot and all of this and that. Danny, have you got any closing words?
Do you know what? You've said it all, mate. But yeah, thanks from me too, guys. We really, really, really appreciate it, because the fact is, without you guys, we wouldn't be doing this. And to be honest, we really enjoy it. So, you know, anything that you want us to have a look at, just please comment. And yeah, we'll bring you as much content as we can. And we just love doing this. So yeah, thanks so much for listening, guys.
Crazy. All right, guys. Everybody take care. Thank you ever so much. And this has been 30 Minute Murder with Statman Will and Dan the Murder Man. Goodbye.
Bye, guys.